Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly ag weather update brought to you by Farm Credit. I'm going to start off tonight looking at some of the latest lightning data because for the first time in a very long time, we've had some storms in places where we've desperately needed them. I'm talking about this part of Louisiana and Texas, or this part of the Carolinas. We've actually been over the last couple of weeks quite dry in these areas, so to get some thunderstorms into these spots has been quite critical. Now, when we compare the droughts, certainly the drought in Texas and Louisiana has been substantially worse than what we've seen in the Carolinas. So this is some of the first rainfall in some of these places in like 45 days. And just so you know, New Orleans is breaking records for heat. They just had a temperature get up at 104 degrees Fahrenheit, which is very rare right along the Gulf Coast. But a lot of our attention is not going to be on this lightning. It's actually going to be on some of the lightning that's right here around the southern edge, this right in through here of our next tropical system that we have to be talking about. So take a look at some satellite data here. Let me just take you back throughout the day. You're watching Idalia here. And this is the next system that's going to be posing a pretty substantial threat for heavy rainfall throughout parts of Georgia, North and South Carolina. And what we're watching here on satellite on Sunday is a relatively disorganized storm system. It's spent much of the last almost 36 hours just sitting here off the Yucatan Peninsula, moving a bit farther to the south. And there has been a shift recently, watching some of the southern side of this and the eastern side of this film with better clouds, that this system is going to move toward this part of Cuba. Now, I bring that up because the overall storm track is going to be dependent on a few things. There's a little bit of ridging that's going to come in over here. There's a trough that's south of Louisiana. And we're going to have to get a lot of wind shear out of the way of this system over the next 24 to 48 hours as it progresses over the very warm water that is in the Gulf of Mexico right now. Now, just as the sun was setting, we had some deep convection that was blowing up with Idalia. And I'm going to show you something. This is an animation using our high-res, not our high-res, but our what we call our mesoscale floater. It is as high-res as the model is, but what you're watching, let me take you back, is we're taking an image every single minute of Idalia's convective towers. And you can see some of these are quite substantial. Now, the problem is, you see this darker area to the north, there's a lot of drier air on the northern side of this, which is something that needs to be overcome in order for Idalia to build an eye, for example, to fill in with decent kind of spiral rain bands and put a large convective plume in near the center, which will eventually clear out. So this is a healthy sign. In fact, you can see all of the gravity waves. Look right inside here as I play this back and forth. See the rippling effect there? That is basically the restoring force of gravity as the overshooting tops punch up against the base of the stratosphere. I love to see those things. But this particular storm system is going to develop, and we think it's going to do so pretty quickly. So what I want to show you next is the European model. We're going to pick this up midday on Monday. So what's changed in the weekend model runs was that the center of circulation for Idalia was once here. We can now see it's moved a bit farther to the south and east, slowing the system down. And if it does end up moving toward Cuba before too long, what this is going to do is change the possible strike location into Florida. Some of the weekend model runs took it as far west as here. Some of the latest model runs are trying to even take it to Tampa, and I'll show you those in just a few moments. Now, as I play this forward, we're looking at mid-level winds to see the steering current. I'm also just trying to assess if there is anything that could produce a lot of shear out ahead of this. But it does appear as we get through Monday night into Tuesday morning that most of the higher wind shear values begin to clear out, which means Idalia doesn't have a big obstacle to get through in terms of high wind shear. What's helping push it along is Franklin's over here, but can you see this kind of ridge that's right in through this area? So that flow comes around like this. And there was, the day before, a trough feature that was sitting in through this area. And then in effect is the flow is kind of coming out of Idalia and steering Idalia in this direction. So if we just play this forward, we can just have a look at where the newest European model run that I have available on Sunday night is expecting Idalia to move. And now you can see that it is expected to miss Tampa north. It's expected to come very close to where Hurricane Michael hit a few years ago. And we just kind of been discussing here with my colleagues today that the potential kind of upper limits of Idalia's strength are actually quite high. So we know this because of how warm the ocean temperatures are, and we also know that the shear is clearing out ahead of it, and nearly every single model simulation, here's a large grouping of them, suggests that Idalia has the potential to rapidly intensify. Now, I'll show you what the National Hurricane Center's got for it in a few moments, but what you need to see is what's left of Idalia will be very difficult to forecast over Georgia, North and South Carolina. In other words, most of the model tracks take the heaviest precipitation and keep it south and east of that line, okay? And if that's the case, then we could have parts of the Carolinas that get nothing after today's storms, other than maybe a little bit going into Monday and early Tuesday. But this could produce some incredibly heavy rain that could hit a large area through here. Now, some of the model's spread is going to include a lot more rain throughout all of AgSouth's territory, but I wanted to show you the latest I've got here on Sunday night watching the tracks of this hurricane. Now you can see that we've broken this down into the European, the GFS, and the UK Met, and then an ensemble mean. And all I want to say is that all 4 models, okay, have been trending a bit farther to the east with time with the projected landfall. Now that means that's going to sweep this into southern Georgia and probably keep it closer to the coast in the Carolinas versus spreading through toward the Appalachian Mountains. Here's the latest data we've got. In fact, let's see if we got a new update on this. Nope, this is the 7 p.m. update on Sunday night. And we can see we are expecting this to become a hurricane. National Hurricane Center is expecting winds over 90 miles an hour. Like I said, the upper limit of this could be substantially higher. We think that 90 mile an hour is probably the lower limit of what this could be when it makes landfall. But it is expected to remain tropical storm strength and hit a lot of AgSouth territory as we go forward. Okay, let's take a look at some of the conditions here. This is the latest I've got on ocean temperatures. So why we're concerned with Idalia's strength is that the ocean temperatures here, 31 degrees C, you know, this is like almost 90 degree Fahrenheit water. In some places I'm sure it is, meaning that there's plenty of heat content in the ocean to tap into. That's going to increase evaporation and really help Idalia continue to form those big, deep, hot towers of, of convection. The other thing is that ahead of this, in fact, let's come back to this in a second. I want to show you one other thing. Let's go from here. Let's go have a look at the potential wind fields. So we're just going to go back to WeatherBell, one of my favorite sites. I am going to use the European model for this. I think it's probably going to have a decent handle on it. Let's just get this down here. Let's flip to a U.S. region. How about just go into the southeast? It's all the way down at the bottom. There it is. And I want to look at surface winds, wind swath as a gust. Okay. All right. So as we look, in fact, if you don't mind, I'm just going to zoom. Well, let's play it all the way out. You can see we could see some 40 to 50 mile an hour gusts, and then offshore well over 70 to 80 here. But I'm curious what's coming through this part of Georgia. We see a lot of 50s and 60s. And if we just kind of zoom in here, let's go back and let's actually choose a state. Let's go choose Florida in this case. So Florida would be up here. And we do see, there it is, we do see wind gusts according to the European model that are likely to be up here, approaching 90, maybe even faster. So we'll just watch out for this very carefully as we go forward. Okay, now I want to get into what we've recently seen. This was, how about this? This was through early in the morning on Sunday, total accumulated precipitation. So what we're seeing here is the last week. Let's zoom that back out so you can see it. So Maria came right over here. Whoops, sorry about that. There we go. Maria went right in through here. This was Harold. This was the ridge riding storm events that hit the eastern Corn Belt. What was left of Harold kind of popped out and rode on a front here. And then we watched all day today. In fact, if we just flip this over to 72 hours, these are the storms we're watching tonight. So they're here and they're here. So that previous map went through Sunday morning. This one goes all the way through Sunday night when I'm recording this. So look at this rain that came into this area. This is desperately needed because up through Sunday morning, look how dry we were in this area. Look how dry we were in the south. Big section of the central Corn Belt was dry. Western plains were a bit dry. And over here in the west, we had rainfall amounts in the last 2 weeks that are like 2,000 to 3,000% of normal because of the rare occurrence of Maria doing what it did. Now, I want to put this in a broader context as well because we can look back at the month of August and kind of get an idea on our month-to-date statistics. Now, while we were not expecting widespread drought development, each video we talked about some regional dryness that we were dealing with. So the storms are kind of coming in just in time to prevent us from getting deeper and deeper into drought. But you do notice that August is going to go down in the lower half of the distribution in terms of dryness. Now, we'll have to see how much rainfall Idalia can put into this to offset those statistics at the very end. But it's important to know that leading up to it, especially this climate reporting district in North Carolina, 125 out of 131. So there has been regional drought development, flash drought development, and it's been something that we've been just trying to assess compared to the longer term outlook, but how it's evolving in the near term. And that area has also shown up on the latest drought monitor. So this one was released on Thursday. We saw expansion across the south, expansion in the northwest, and pockets here in the central U.S. But this has also grown a bit here in the latest drought monitor that's just been released. On the soil moisture side of it, now this is down 40 inches or 100 centimeters, and this is a percentile. So we're comparing this to a historical distribution or average. You can see that you look back right now and compare it to average, we've got some really dry subsurface soil moisture issues. And it's the same for parts of the Midwest and upper Midwest. It's the same for the Willamette Valley, parts of, the plains in the south. There's several regions in through here that have been quite dry. So that's why I was kind of excited to watch on Sunday night. Look at these storms blowing up here. Big time storms, locally very heavy rainfall coming out of some of these storms that just popped today. It's all along a cold front boundary that's finally draped far enough to the south, and it is part of the reason why Franklin's having a hard time getting closer to the U.S. So I'm not too concerned about Franklin. It's going to stay out to open ocean, so we just better get a look at when and how this precipitation's coming in. So let's get this out here to early Monday morning. A lot of scattered showers and storms still in place in Virginia, North Carolina. Here's Idalia. You see that the latest European model did bring it right over this tip of Cuba. That's much farther east, but we are expecting on Monday night the risk of those stronger storms all along that kind of stalled out frontal boundary that's going to sit right in this area. Drier in southern Georgia, but wetter into parts of the Carolinas over toward the Blue Ridge Mountains. Now from here, let's just play it out to Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon, and evening. So again, the stalled out front, showers and storms. Here comes Idalia. So then we go from Tuesday evening, into, can't seem to grab it. There we go. What am I doing? There we go. Sorry about that. We see by Wednesday morning, afternoon, and evening, that's when Idalia is expected to make landfall, probably early in the morning on Wednesday, and then run across southern Georgia into South Carolina, the northern shield by Wednesday night, getting into North Carolina. And then it's out by the time we get into Thursday afternoon. So just watch the evolution again. And in fact, let's just go have a closer look in here. If we just type in southeast, there we go. Now watch. Here comes Idalia. That's now Wednesday at 2 a.m. There's the heavy rain by 2 p.m. on Wednesday afternoon. It moves into Wednesday night in South Carolina, and then it's out. Now following it, we still have storms. It's not like it's going away in parts of southern Georgia, but that's Idalia. If we add all that up, take a look at the same view. Total accumulated precipitation through the next 5 days. A lot of places in here picking up 1 to 3 inches of rainfall, locally heavier amounts. Southern Georgia, there could be 4, 5, 6 inches of rain out of Idalia, and heaviest is going to be right here in this part of Florida. So this is a bit of a drought buster as this comes through, at least a flash drought buster as this comes through and hits some of these areas. How about some probabilities? This is the chance through the end of this week of getting at least, an inch of rain. And if I bump that up to 2 inches of rain, we can really hone in on those heavy rainfall regions, and even 4. We're just trying to identify where the ensembles are putting the heaviest rains from Idalia. So now we've got an idea on what to expect throughout this upcoming week, okay? Now, just to point out, Franklin is out here spinning off and not going to be a main factor, but it is expected to reach major hurricane status. And as Idalia moves through and this ridge that was suppressing the midsection of the country gets reoriented, I do want to tell you that when you look out there at those drier spots, this is, let's go all the way to 10 days now. This is the 10-day probability of getting less than half of an inch. So for the corn and soybean growers in North and South Carolina, Georgia, just pay attention to how dry we are in the Midwestern U.S. all the way down to Texas and, of course, the Southwest United States. So from here, what's the pattern up to? All right, so I want you to not stop watching here. I want you to come over to the West Coast with me because there's this high over low block that's here. Well, it's a high over low. I can't call it a block. It's not around for 10 days, but there's a high over low pattern here. It's kind of stuck a bit, and it opens up by Tuesday into Wednesday. Now, another one begins to form by the time we get out there to Saturday. See it high over low. Now, why I'm telling you to watch that is because it's going to influence the size and shape of this ridge, which will ultimately determine how our temperatures recover once we're done with the remnants of Idalia. And it appears we're going to move back over to warmer conditions as the flow ends up doing this once we get up there to Labor Day weekend. So let's see how long the pattern's expected to stay like this and what it could mean, because if the forecast models have this right into the second week, we're going to be seeing a setup where, unless we have something big coming out of the tropics, this isn't exactly the right pattern for us to go over wet, and it's certainly one that's going to take us up to the hotter temperatures. So we see that the day 8 through 14 from the CPC and the European are similar. We've got drier risks in Ag South territory, drier the farther to the west you go, except for the Pacific Northwest. Same thing with the European model. So a lot of dryness in this forecast because of that expanding ridge. Now, what about the heat? I do want to show you something interesting here. This came from the National Weather Service of Atlanta. This is their public site, so we can kind of show it here. And what this is they put a bunch of crayons up in the heat over the weekend on the 26th and let the heat melt them. So it's kind of a neat little thing to see here, but that's how hot it was getting there. And I was watching one of my favorite animations. This goes back to the 22nd, the 23rd. Every dot that you see here, as you can tell, it's within a few degrees or tying a daily record. And if there's an X, it's a daily record that was broken. This is all the oppressive heat each day that we saw. By the time we got into the weekend, though, this is crazy. There was a frost in the UP of Michigan. So after a week of excessive heat, a frost in the UP of Michigan. Now, some stats. This is the month-to-date average temperature ranks by climate district. Top 20 event in the Carolinas. This reporting district in Georgia is having its second warmest. All of Florida is having its hottest. Same thing with southern Mississippi and Louisiana and also Alabama. And look at Texas. That is where the heat has been. And unfortunately, that's where it's going to stay. Those were Sunday's temperatures. Monday's still very hot in those same locations. But we know as Tuesday gets here, we're going to knock these temperatures back a bit. Same thing for Wednesday. This is all rain-cooled air and cloud cover. By the time we get into Thursday, much of the same. But as we get into the weekend, that's Friday and this Saturday and Sunday, this heat opens back up in the Midwest and it's going to press toward the east as we go forward. I want to show that to you by looking at this 5-day sliding window of average temperature anomalies. So this is the cooler weather we've got through next weekend. I mean, cool being relative here. And then we start to get this bounce happening after, we get out there past Labor Day. And look at the heat that's coming into the midsection of the country here. It's expected to just set up residency there for a while. That's because the pattern forecast by the models is doing a lot of this with a large ridge here. Now, we're still going to have to watch the tropics for any development because, of course, we're moving into that time of year where we can have rapid development at any given moment. But it does appear that we will get a bit of a slowdown in the tropics starting, very soon after Idalia and Franklin are kind of done. It's just a temporary, pause on things given the position of a few different atmospheric events like the MJO. But we need to go out there and have a look at the longer term stuff because just released on Friday, the newest week 3, week 4 outlook suggests that we stay on the hotter side of things, and we could be, the equal chances part of this forecast is probably because of the uncertainty of tropical systems, not any other reason. Because if the ridge is in place, we should be drier going forward into late September, which is what this time frame is. So what's causing all of this? Well, our El Nino continues to build while a lot of warm water sits across the Atlantic. And these factors are important to kind of weigh against one another. And when you combine that with the fact that the Southern Oscillation Index is still quite negative and we're getting El Nino-like behavior starting to really show up in the atmosphere, we just have to go ask, well, what does that late summer, early fall look like? Now, this is interesting. When you stitch together all the years where we had an El Nino developing, you can see them right here. We did not have we did not have a dry fall. We had wetter than average conditions during fall. So we want to know if that's not only in the history, but also in the forecast. So this is the newest update from the European model. And overall, you could say in Ag South territory, it was probably because it was initialized dry that it's a bit drier than average here, just one step over. But overall, we don't see a very strong dry signal in this area. The National Multimodal Ensemble even has this with a better near normal to wetter than normal signal with the strongest dry signal in the Northwest. Again, the time period here is September, October, November. And just released, this is the newest update from the IRI Multimodal Probability Forecast System. And again, we're not looking at too much of a risk of large-scale dry weather, but I got to just note here that southern Georgia, northern Florida did show up in their system with having wetter conditions. Again, September, October, November. So that's just one thing I want to be on the lookout for as we start to make this seasonal transition. remembering that we still have about 70% of the hurricane season ahead of us, all right? And we know how warm the ocean temperatures are. But that gives you a little flavor for what's out there for the rest of September and moving forward. One last thing to bring up to speed on, this is the newest update from the European model looking out globally over the next 10 days. A couple of points here, very dry throughout a large section of China and India as well. The monsoon really shut down early here. Quite stormy throughout much of Europe except for France, as you can see. South America, now this is what I want to talk about. These are actually not monsoonal rains, but above average rainfall happening in Brazil, Uruguay, Paraguay, and Argentina. And this is critical because in, 18 days, we will start planting in Brazil. So that's the go date. September 15th, they're allowed to start planting. So if they get any early season moisture, that is going to be critical. Other than that, I'll keep an eye on any would-be tropical system in the Western Pacific, because it can, if you just kind of follow the map here, influence the pattern in the Gulf of Alaska. And that could change everything for the U.S. But take note, right now, over the next 10 days, most of the central United States is going to be very dry, and the heat's coming back on in that area. So a lot just to say, watch, and we'll do that. We'll just keep an eye on this, and we'll talk about it again next week. Actually, next week is Labor Day, so I'll come to you the Tuesday following. Have a good one. I appreciate your attention. Thanks.